Hello again and welcome to another Mordy and Glory Warhammer 40k video. In today's episode, we shall be doing another tournament after action report. That's right, it's time for some more dispatches from the front lines. And oh boy, do I have a traitorous meatball for your viewing pleasure today. Because I took Guard to a tournament, but it wasn't Imperial Guard. It was time for the Death Guard to make their long-awaited debut in a tournament report. I've been playing Death Guard since the end of 1900, slowly cultivating the army in the background, and now I've had enough practices with it. It was time to take it into the tournament scene. So without further ado, let's not mess around. Let us smelly our way right into today's episode. As is tradition, I want to start off with a few thank yous. Firstly, I want to say a big thank you to Just Play Games in Liverpool for organising and hosting this event. Just Play has quickly become my go-to venue for regular RTTs. They host tournaments every single month, and they do at least one 40k RTT every month as well. And they even do the occasional GT as well. And they've just got the formula nailed down to a T. They have got the terrain, they've got the round timings, they've got it all absolutely smashed. So I really enjoy playing there, and it's just a really fun, welcoming environment. On top of this, I want to say a big thank you not only to the Just Play venue, but the Just Play community. I've been going there a while now. I've started to get to know a lot of the people there that play there regularly, and they are always a pleasure and a treat to play against. So a big thank you to all of my opponents, a big thank you to Just Play, and a big thank you to that local community. They're very welcoming and a great bunch of guys and girls. But with all that said, now let's get into the video proper, beginning with the list overview. As per usual, I have done a separate video deep diving and getting into the nitty gritty of the army. And so I'll make sure there's a link to that down in the description below and also at the end of this video. But we'll do a brief summary now. Overall, this was my mechanized Death Guard army. Something that I have been really play testing and trying out, sort of refining the formula on over a few practice games and battle reports. It's a bit of a controversial one because I do take double Land Raider in this list. Now, you won't see one Land Raider in most Death Guard lists. The fact that I take two is definitely off meta, but I have found that two Land Raiders is a very durable threat, and they bring a lot of punch to the table with their 4 las cannons each. Inside each one of those Land Raiders, I have a unit of Plague Marines. Each Plague Marine squad has got 2 of the Plague Spewers, 2 of the Blight Launchers, 2 plasma guns. We've got 2 Plague Marines with the heavy plague weapons, 1 Plague Marine with the regular plague weapon, and then we've got the Sergeant who's got his plasma gun. Each squad is also led by a Tallyman, so there's 2 of those units, 1 in each Land Raider. I then have 2 more units of Plague Marines, and they are inside 2 Rhinos. Now, they have identical weapon loadouts, Blight Launchers, Plague Spears, all the same. The only difference is that one of those units has a Tallyman and one of those units doesn't. And that's simply because you can only take 3 Tallymen as per the rule of 3. So I've got 40 Plague Marines with 3 Tallymen mech'd up in double Land Raider and double Rhino. Supporting this, I also have a big unit of Blight Lord Terminators. Now, I have been reliably informed by multiple Death Guard players that Blight Lords are terrible. But I like Terminators, and these are the ones I've got. So I took 10 of them. 10 of them. I actually quite like them. The reason I like them is because you can take them in a big squad. And at the end of the day, they are pretty durable. Between the fact that they can have Contagion for -1 ballistic skill and weapon skill around them. And then you can also put Cloud of Flies them. And they've got a 4% vulnerable save. They're not there to do damage. They're there to absorb damage. So I've got a big unit of 10 of them led by a Death Guard Lord in Terminator armor. and I've given him the enhancement of, I believe it's the Living Death. It's the one that extends his aura ranges, including contagion, by 3 inches. I find this pairs really, really well with his datasheet ability that allows him to do D3 mortal wounds on a 4+ to all units within his contagion range. What I like to do is keep this unit off the board until turn 3, or drop them down, sort of rapid ingress them in turn 3 if my opponent went first. And then what I like to do is essentially have contagion range of 12 inches, and I put them somewhere very aggressive, because the way that the mortal wound thing works is the end of the turn. Not just your turn, the turn. That's your opponent's turn and your turn. So over the course of the game, he can really dole out a lot of mortal wounds. Finally, last, but and to be honest, maybe least, I had 2 units of Nurglings. Classic Death Guard unit. They're just there to drop in, do teleporter homers, and all that good stuff. And I want to do a shout out. I want to say a big thank you to Matty P, aka the Rockin' Gamers, on the MG Discord, because he actually lent me the Nurglings. I don't own any myself, but he is a fellow Plaguey boy. And I reached out and said, hey, dude, I want to run this list. Could I borrow your Nurglings? He said, no problem. And he actually made a special trip to Just Play to give me the Nurglings. So big props to him, and a massive 07 to him down in the comment section as well, guys. Now that just about covers the army list. Now let's get into the lay of the land. This is the part of the video where I like to talk about the format of the event, how competitive it was, and what the terrain was like. So it was a 1-day, 3-round RTT, and there were about 22 players at the event. So it was a classic RTT experience. Overall, I would describe the event as regular competitive. There were a couple of players there that were running just fun, fluffy lists, and there were a couple of players there that were running the top tier cutting edge meta, and everyone else in between was kind of running their faction with their best list, depending on what they could put together with their models or just what they like to use. But I've been going to Just Play for a while now, and they've really been cultivating that competitive community with these regular RTTs. And so most of the players there had been to tournaments before. In fact, I don't think there was anyone there that was a tournament virgin. And so they've been playing a lot, they play against each other a lot, and a definite local competitive meta has formed. It's not got every single player with the most cutthroat stuff, but there's always a few people bringing the S tier stuff, and everyone else, I'd say, falls comfortably into the pretty competitive and pretty good category. Now that just about covers the lay of the land, but now let's get to the bit you've all been waiting for, the real meat and potatoes of the after action report. Let's take a look at the battles. Now, game number 1 was against Morpheus and his Imperial Guard. Now, you may recognize this army, and that is because by a strange quirk of fate, by a glitch in the Matrix, Morpheus and I have actually played against each other 3 times, each time on one of these after action reports, and every single time it seems to be we get paired in round 1 as well. I don't know what's going on with BCP, but whenever him and I are at the same tournament, we get paired round 1. And actually, you know what? I'm not complaining in any way, shape or form. It's a great way to start the day. Morpheus is not only a good person to play against, but he's also supports the channel. He's a good mate. And so it's just nice to be able to sit down with a game and play against someone who you know is going to be a great sport. As for the army list, the Imperial Guard have got Lord Sol Leontus, Ursula Creed, a platoon command squad, another platoon command squad, a tank commander with Grand Strategist, 1, 2, 3 10-man units of Imperial Guard, a 20-man blob of Guardsmen, and then we've got 2 Basilisks, a Cyclops, a Hydra, a Leman Russ Battle Tank, a Leman Russ Executioner, and a Leman Russ Exterminator. Finally, we've got 3 individual Scout Sentinels and a Chimera. The mission for round 1 was Purge the Foe. A little bit of a tricky one for the Guard, who tend to rely upon trying to do better on primary. And then we had the twist, which was Vox Static, so it's going to be an extra CP for new orders and CP rerolls. And then the deployment map was Sweeping Engagement, which is kind of like Dawn of War, but at an angle. Speaking of deployment, I decided to go heavy on the left flank. I actually went for a little bit of a refuse flank. So I put 2 Land Raiders down on the left. And I was kind of Billy Big Bollocks with this. I actually had one out and proud ready on the line to just move forward. I figure that land raiders are kind of tough and that I should be able to take the opening barrage from the guard. That was a very, very brave decision, as you guys will see later on. In the middle, I had a Rhino with some Plague Marines in, and then on the right, I had the Rhino with the Plague Marines that don't have the Talisman with them. As for the Imperial Guard, the lapdogs of the False Emperor, they had an Armoured Fist Squad on the right-hand side with the Lemurus Executioner, and then in the back right-hand corner, they had their Lord Solar and the Artillery Park. In the centre, we had the Tank Commander and also the Creed Blob and the Lemurus Exterminator. And then on the far left flank, we had the big blob of Guardsmen. The Sentinels were kind of dispersed equally, so you had one on the left, one in the mid, one on the right-hand side, and then the Hydra was also part of the middle force as well. Both sides had picked tactical objectives, and with all of that done, it was time to see who was going to go first. We rolled off, and as is tradition, I went second. With the initiative seized by the Emperor's true finest, they leap into action, and there's a bit of an advance across the line. Over on the right-hand side, the Armoured Fist Squad and one of the Sentinels and the Executioner start pushing forward in a very intimidating armoured thrust down towards the objective that's in the middle right. In the centre, we have a Sentinel and a Hydra move forward, just trying to establish lots of screening. I do have Terminators in reserve, so it's a good idea to try and push me back. And then over on the left, we have the Sentinel and also a unit of Guardsmen starting to push forward onto the, not quite making it, but getting near that objective on the left-hand flank as well. We're getting to guard shooting phase turn 1, and the Sentinel pilot in the middle chucks a teleporter home into the centre to get 3 points. That does secure some secondary points for the guard. The other secondary they had, by the way, was capturing the outpost, which got binned off, of course, at the end of the turn, because it wasn't something the guard were likely to get with not having too much in reserve themselves. We then go to the proper shooting of the guard, and everything fires into my Land Raider. We are talking long-range executioner shots, exterminator, Creed with the mortar getting free fields of fire, loads of artillery from the Basilisk. Everything you can think of slams into that Land Raider, and it almost dies. I have to admit there was definitely some squeaky bum time. I was puckering. And it came down to essentially a few lucky dice rolls on my end and a few unlucky dice rolls on Morpheus' end. So at first, the guard firepower was furious. All of the random shots were coming at 5s and 6s for a lot of the plasma cannons and stuff, and for the basilisks and whatnot. But then the firepower started to peter out, and rather than getting big numbers, we started seeing some small numbers like 1s and 2s, and the wounding really started to cool off. So there were lots of shots, lots of hits, but the wounding wasn't great. And then I wasn't making many saves at the beginning of the turn, but then my saves started kicking in, and once the dust had settled, Land Raider was left alive on 2 wounds. Should that Land Raider have died turn 1? It deserved to die, considering how ballsy I'd been with it, but I suppose things did balance out a little bit, because Morpheus rolled hot at first and then cooled down, and I rolled cold at first and then warmed up. But with the Land Raider clinging onto life, we go into Death Guard turn 1. Now, my objective turn 1 was to try and clear as much of the enemy screening units as possible. I wanted to create gaps so that I could bring my Terminators in turn 2 and really start putting the pressure onto the guard. Try and force them back onto the defensive, because right now they're being quite aggressive and I want to try and seize the initiative back. Over on the left-hand side, I move forward with my Land Raider and I'm able to get my Plague Marines out onto the objective. I then destroy the Sentinel that is on that flank and charge into the Guardsman on the left, but I get a pretty poor charge and not many of my guys actually get into combat, and so as a result I just sort of maul the 20-man blob, but I don't kill it. In the center, I move forward the Land Raider, and that's got some Plague Marines inside it, and I take another unit of Plague Marines that from the Rhino in the middle, and they move onto the middle objective. Now, what I do is I use that unit of Plague Marines and the las cannons from one of the Land Raiders to pick off the Hydra that's in the center, and then when it comes to charges, I charge the Sentinel that was in the middle, and I'm able to kill that as well. So I'm just sort of clearing out these pockets of guards and these screening units, trying to, like I say, make these gaps. Now, there's a lot of activity happening on the left and in the middle, but on the right-hand flank, I play it cool. And that's because I've only got one unit of basically unsupported Plague Marines over here, and if I go barreling out from behind my safe ruin, that Executioner is going to pick them up. I want to wait for the guard to get a little bit closer, even if that means giving them a few points, before I can hit them in one concentrated, concerted effort. Now, before we move on to Battle Round 2, there are a couple of key highlights from this turn. Firstly, I also had drawn Capture Enemy Outposts for one of my secondaries, which I had binned off, but I had got Tempting Target for my other secondary, and I was able to score that. But the real big swing on the points was the fact that we were playing Purge, and I had been able to kill multiple units in my first turn, and the guard hadn't. And so as a result of that Land Raider not going down, not only did it allow me to push forward and be kind of aggressive and get onto objectives that maybe I wouldn't have been able to get onto. I might not have got that Tempting Target if that Land Raider had died. It also meant that I was able to kill more. And so potentially, with that Land Raider living, we saw a 13-point swing. 5 points Tempting Target, and then I got the big 8 on the Purge primary. With all of that said, let's get into round 2. Now, the Imperial Guard are under a little bit of pressure here. They started off very aggressively and had a pretty good opening barrage, but they are now under a lot of pressure themselves, and a lot of their screening units have been taken out. They need to do a big hit against these exposed Death Guard units to try and bring things back over to their favor. And at first, things seem to go rather well for the Guard. They push their armoured fist column onto the objective on the bottom right. They line up a number of units to fire into the centre and clear away the Plague Marines there. And they're able to fall back from the Death Guard over on the left-hand side as well. On top of this, their secondaries are eminently scoreable. They have got Cleanse and Extend battle lines, which they're easily able to do because they control that bottom right-hand flank, cleansing one objective and extending their battle lines. And the initial firepower from the Guard also seems promising. The Plague Marines in the centre, despite the fact that they popped Cloud of Flies, do kind of eat a Demolisher Cannon shell, and once the dust has settled, over half the unit is wiped out. And then the firepower starts to peter a little bit. It takes way more than it should do to finish off the remnants of that Plague Marine unit. And by the time they finally go down, there isn't that much left to go over onto the Land Raider. And what does go into the Land Raider struggles to hit because I can pop smoke on that thing. And despite the fact that the Guard did get a few hits and a few wounds, the tough armoured hide of the Land Raider refuses to buckle. Now, most of the fields of fire, in fact, all the fields of fire from Creed and also the fire from the Exterminator had gone into the Plague Marines to try and up the AP. The Land Raider was mostly on a 2-up and a 3-up save from a lot of this stuff, but even so, probably one of those wounds should have snuck through, but they didn't. And the Land Raider that should have died turn 1 has just survived turn 2. And unfortunately for the Imperial Guard, this would prove to be something of a bad omen, because we go into Death Guard turn 2 and we start tearing it up. Firstly, over on the left-hand side, I move my Plague Marines forward so that they are going to get an easy charge off on the Guard that I've tried to run away from them, and they can bring their firepower to bear against the Lemurus Exterminator. I then take the unit of Plague Marines that are in the centre, not the ones that have just died, but the ones that were in the Land Raider, the other one that was in the middle, and I push those guys forward. I have my Plague Marines over on the right-hand side, which have been waiting patiently, jump out of their Rhino, so they are now in a position to go after the Chimera, as well as going after the Sentinel. Finally, I bring my 10 Terminators down right slap bang in the face of the Guard, right in the middle, right in the cauldron, in a really Billy Big Bollocks maneuver, and in a position where the Guard cannot ignore them. Now, the Guard do try and overwatch the Terminators with the Tank Commander with Demolish Cannon, but unfortunately, their dice continue to let them down, and only a single Blight Lord is injured from an entire volley of overwatching Demolisher Cannon tank shells. We then get to the shooting, and over on the left-hand side, I put my Plague Marines into the Lemurus Exterminator because I'm pretty confident I'm going to be able to finish those Guardsmen off in melee, and I'm able to do some damage to it. The Land Raider, the injured one, also fires its Lads Cannons in, and between those two units, we do actually fairly badly damage that Exterminator, bringing it down to about 3 wounds. We then rinse and repeat in the center with the second unit of Plague Marines and the Land Raider, putting their firepower into the Tank Commander, cutting his wounds in half. The firepower from the Blight Lords actually goes into the Chimera that's on the bottom right-hand objective, and is able to chip off a few wounds from it, which allows the Plague Marines that are on the bottom right to throw a grenade and then use their remaining firepower to finish off the Chimera, forcing those Guardsmen to disembark. All of this damage is pretty devastating for the Guard, but things go from bad to worse when the combat starts rolling out. On the left-hand side, the Plague Marines easily mop up the remaining Guardsmen from that platoon. In the middle, my Plague Marines are able to make a longish charge against Creed's unit, which is hiding behind the middle room. Now, they were all up against the wall, so I was able to fight them. And those Plague Marines just slaughter their way through Creed's unit. The only survivor is Creed herself. And then we have the bottom right, and my Plague Marines go in against the Sentinel and the Guardsman. The Power Fists and Power Weapons go against Sentinel. Everything else goes against the Guardsman, and both of those units are just destroyed, just slaughtered, just wiped out. We are doing what Plague Marines love to do: shoot one target, charge another, and it is causing devastating casualties across the entire Guard army. But there is one last nail that we need to put into this coffin. That's the Terminators. Now, they have a 9-inch charge to make against the Tank Commander in front of them, and I have saved 2 CP in case I need to do the charge, the reroll. Turns out I don't need to spend that CP. I just get a big 9-inch charge. I go plowing into the Tank Commander, and I bring him down to just 1 wound. After all the Blight Lord swords had been going, he's left on 1 wound. But really, the big problem with this is that Blight Lord unit, we're now heading into turn 3, battle round 3. And that means the entire Guard army, everything that is left, is going to be within contagion range of my big smelly lord that does the mortal wounds. And also, of course, it means now they're all going to be on reduced ballistic skill as well. And to add insult to injury, my Chaos Lord starts spaffing out mortal wounds left, right, and center. He brings the Exterminator down to a single wound. I think Creed is actually finished off by the mortal wounds because she had been injured. The Tank Commander that they were facing, he's on 1 wound and he dies the mortal wounds. Just everything that can take mortal wounds does, and it just cripples the remaining Guard units. Honestly, that turn 2 charge from the Terminators really sealed the game. There is a final hurrah from the Guard in their turn 3. Every last unit they have goes into the Terminators. Basilisks, Executioners, we've got some long-range shots from the Exterminator who's still in combat. Everything goes into the Terminators. But between the fact that everything is -1 ballistic skill and the fact that I put Cloud of Flies on the Terminator unit, they're basically -1 to hit, -1 ballistic skill. Most Guard units are hitting on 5s or 6s, and maybe 2 or 3 Terminators die in total. That's all the Guard can do in their turn 3. And the Death Guard turn 3 is just, it's devastating. Completely cleans up the remaining Guard units. Exterminator going down, the Blight Lords break into the back lines with the Lord Solar and the Basilisks. They do end up going. The Lord Solar unit is targeted first in combat, goes down. I start tying the Basilisks up, and the remaining turns, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5 Death Guard, consist of us picking the board clean of Imperial Guard units. And as a result, the final score of the game was 47 points to the Emperor's True Finest, but the cool, crisp 100 points, the big 100, to the Chosen of Nurgle. I have to say, I think that might be one of the most brutal and one-sided games of 40k I've had in a long time. The Death Guard do feel very, very powerful, and I don't remember the last time I was actually able to essentially win a game by the end of turn 2. But just goes to show the power that the Death Guard really have at their disposal, even when using something off-meta like Double Land Raider. But the main thing I want to say about this game is I want to do a huge shout out to Morpheus, my opponent, because he took it like an absolute champ. That was a very difficult game, and a lot of players in his position, and I've been in his position, but a lot of players that have been in his position would have got very salty, very tilted, and they would have made their displeasure known. But he took it like an absolute gent, and I just want to give him special recognition and just a shout out for that, because it does go to show that he truly is an officer and a gentleman and a scholar. So big thank you to Morpheus for the great game, and thank you for being a good sport about it as well, because I know it was a difficult situation. But we've had one game against Imperial Guard, yes. But what about second game against Imperial Guard? That's right, going into round 2, I needed to lay the smackdown onto the Emperor's True Finest once again, because I played against Ash and his Guard army. Now, this army list was very different to something that I would personally run, and it's one of the reasons why I actually quite like playing into other Guard players, because it gives me an idea of what my fellow commanders are out there running. And I would say that Ash had gone for quite an elite Guard army. Overall, he had a Lord Solar Leontus, a platoon command squad, and a tank commander with Grand Strategist and Ursula Creed. We then had a unit of 10 Catcher and Jungle Fighters, which were for the Supreme Command Blob. And then we had a Basilisk, 2 full-size Bulgrin squads, and then there was a unit of Kazakin, another unit of Kazakin, a Lemurus Exterminator, a Manticore, another Manticore, 2 Scout Sentinels, and Tempestus Scions. Now, if you actually add it up and work out the numbers on both sides, in a funny sort of way, the Death Guard actually outnumbered the Imperial Guard. Between my Plague Marines and my Terminators, I have got 50 infantry that are going to be pushing forward and fighting for the middle ground. The Imperial Guard have got 2 units of Kazakin and 2 units of Bulgrin. That's only 32 infantry. The Guard have got 2 battle tanks, but the Death Guard have got 2 Land Raiders, which are, I would argue, in a heavier weight category. Where the Guard has a significant advantage is, though, with their artillery. They are going to be hitting me hard from out of line of sight, and it's going to be very difficult for me to counter that. The mission is Sites of Power, and this is where the Death Guard have their own advantage, because we have a lot of characters that we're pushing into the middle of the board, whereas most of the Guard characters want to be staying back and doing support roles. For the twist, it was Chilling Rain, and then the deployment was Search and Destroy, which is Table Quarters. Speaking of deployment, I went for a similar game plan as last time. I had both of my Land Raiders more towards the left-hand flank, and then I had both of my Rhinos more towards the center. The big difference between my deployment this time and last time is I went for a completely refused flank. I had no interest in going on that far right objective. I wanted to focus on the far left and on the middle. Basically, my game plan was force concentration, force concentration, force concentration. Let's just focus on securing 3 things wholly rather than trying to spread out and cover all the objectives a little bit. Interestingly, Ash went for a different approach, and in traditional Guard style, he went for more of a combat width. So he had a unit of Kazakin and a Sentinel on the right-hand side, and they were going to move on to that bottom right objective, the one that I have no interest in. And then in the center, we've got both unit of Bulgrins pushing forward there with the Tank Commander. And on the left, we've got the other unit of Kazakin, and the Exterminator. Of course, all of the artillery is at the back with the Lord Solar, and one of the Sentinels and the Scions are in reserve. We both pick tactical objectives, and we roll off to see who gets the first turn. And oh look, Skinwalker Mordian is in effect because I actually do get the first turn. My turn 1 isn't overly exciting. A lot of the Imperial Guard stuff is hidden. So what I end up doing is taking my Land Raider on the left hand side and I just push it forward onto the objective up there. That gets me secure no man's land, which is one of my secondaries, and puts me in a nice position for turn 2 because I've got a Land Raider with 10 Plavers inside of it sat on an objective. My other secondary objective was Overwhelming Force, which I can't get this turn because the Guard haven't pushed forward onto anything and I can't get to their backfield one. Elsewhere, I take my other Land Raider and I start pushing it towards middle left, and then I take my 2 Rhinos and I start pushing those towards the middle as well, but taking advantage of as much line of sight blocking terrain as possible. With a quick Death Guard turn 1 over, we go into the Imperial Guard turn 1, and they push forward with the Kazakin and the Sentinel on the right hand side, and they start making their way towards the objective on the bottom right, and they'll get there by the end of their turn 2 movement. They also start pushing forward the Bulgrin into the center, and there's 2 distinct waves of Bulgrin that are forming. There's one that's in front of the other, and I can see that what Ash wants to do is basically take a charge with 1 unit of Bulgrin and then counter charge with the next unit, which is a really good way of using double big brick of Bulgrin, because you know that they're tough enough to take the punch. So you can really do that thing that Guard like to do, which is get hit hard and then hit back even harder. Over on the left-hand side, we have the unit of Kazakin, which push forward and trying to get onto the objective up there. And then we've also got the Leman Russ Exterminator and the Tank Commander, which line up for some shots. Now, all of the Guard firepower goes into that Land Raider. I don't know what it is about my Land Raider, the left flank, but they always seem to be getting hit. So, and it's basically the same as last time. A lot of Guard firepower goes in. We've got the Exterminator, we've got the Tank Commander, we've got Creed using Fields of Fire, and then we've got all the artillery, and everything goes plowing into that Land Raider on the left-hand side. But it does manage to survive on a handful of wounds. It is very, very badly degraded, but it does manage to cling on. And that is, again, a huge boost for me because it gives me an extra asset that I wasn't really expecting to have going into turn 2. Going into Death Guard turn 2, and I start putting the pressure on. On the left-hand side, I disembark my Plague Marines from the Land Raider, and I go into the Kazakin, and I'm able to effectively wipe them out, no problem. My firepower on that flank goes into the Leman Russ Exterminator initially, but Ash pops smoke, and this does start reducing my firepower pretty significantly. So I take about half the wounds off the Exterminator, but then I switch over to the Tank Commander and I'm able to get some really good hits in on him with the second Land Raider, and that means that I actually bring that Tank Commander down to just a handful of wounds. It may have been as low as 1 wound, but I feel like I brought the Tank Commander down to like 4 wounds and the Exterminator was down to about 7 wounds between the various bits of firepower that I had thrown around. But the real main event this turn is my charges going into the center. You see, I disembarked a unit of Plague Marines, and they were ready to go into the middle after softening up the first unit of Bulgrin, and I'd also deep striked down my big unit of Terminators. Now, this was a risk because if I don't get the charge off, they're going to get hit by the Basilisk, and they're going to get slowed down to a crawl. My Plague Marines go for the charge. They've only got like a 7-inch charge to make, and they get it easy peasy. I then roll the charge for the Terminators, and I fail it, I re-roll it, and I fail it again. So now we've got a single unit of Plague Marines going into a large squad of Bulgrin. Now the Bulgrin had been reduced down by about 2 because of the firepower from the Plague Marines, but still, that's not a great position for Plague Marines to be in at all. Of course, with me being the charging unit, I do fight first, and I am able to kill another one of the Bulgrin and badly injure a second one. But there's still 3 of them rocking around. And 3 Bulgrin are going to get 12 attacks. They're going to be reducing me down to a 4-up save. And there's going to be Lots of damage too going around. Bulgrin should be perfect at bonking Marines on the head. But the problem is that my Contagion is the -1 weapon skill, -1 ballistic skill one. So the Bulgrins swing back and just miss a lot. They just don't do what they should be doing. And so what ends up happening is I lose maybe 3 Plague Marines from what is 3 or 4 Bulgrin. It's really not as bad as it could have been, and I handily am able to control that middle objective and deny it from the Guard. I just have more OC there. Turn 2 for the Guard, and they have been hit hard, but not too hard, but they're ready to start hitting back even harder. On the top left, the Kazakin come back with the reinforcements, and they also bring a Sentinel in there as well. A unit of Scions deep strike down to try and support and to put themselves in a position for trying to get objectives next turn. We also have in the center the next unit of Bulgrin move up, and on the bottom right, the Kazakin and the other Sentinel ensconce themselves behind some terrain on that bottom right hand objective, and that's where they stay for the rest of the game. I'm happy to cede control of that objective to them. As for the Guard shooting, well, their secondaries are attempting target, which I picked as the top left, and bring it down. That means all the firepower pretty much needs to go up there. Now, the Exterminator had moved forward so it could get onto the objective, but this had put it in contagion range. Now, it tries to soften up the Land Raider, but because it's in contagion range and the Land Raider has popped smoke, it's really struggling to hit. And in fact, it doesn't get any hits with the cannon and with the Exterminator autocannon, which means no Withering Hail. And then the rest of the shots either go wide or don't wound, or I just make my armor save against them. This means that now, rather than the Land Raider being dead, the artillery has to try and go for the Land Raider to finish it off, because if Ash doesn't, he's missing out on Bring It Down. And both Manticores go in, and they fail to kill it. They really, really struggle to do any damage. There's low numbers of shots being rolled, and there's difficulty to wound as well. There's no rerolls to wound, no rerolls to hit against the Land Raider because it's only one model. And so between low numbers of shots and then struggling to hit, and then you've got the fact that the Land Raider is toughness 12, so struggling to wound, the Manticores just bounce off. So it comes over to the tank commander, who is finally able to finish off the Land Raider with some well-placed Demolisher Cannon shells, but that means the Plague Marines are just sat there sitting pretty. So the Guard managed to bring it down, but they didn't get Tempting Target. And that was pretty much all of the Guard firepower going into that Land Raider. The only other thing that happened in the shooting phase was the Basilisk did go after the Terminators and was able to injure one of them, and of course slowed my Blight Lords down to a crawl 2-inch movement for them now. In the middle, things start spicing up when the second unit of Bulgrin, as planned, go barreling into my unit of Plague Marines, my sort of 7 or 8 Plague Marine squad that's in the center. But once again, the machinations of Papa Nurgle rear their ugly head, and these Bulgrins are only hitting on 4s. Now, they got 24 attacks, but they're only hitting on 4s. And so they hit with... Ash hits a little bit low. He hits with about like 10. Should have hit with like 12 an average, but he only hits like 10. And when it comes to wounding, he's wounding on 3s. And, you know, he gets an alright number of wounds. Sort of gets maybe 5 or 6 wounds on me. And then I just pass quite a lot of my saves. It's pretty brutal, actually. And so I only lose about 3 Plague Marines from this big 6-man unit of Bulgrin. And then my Plague Marines get to strike back, and they hit into the unit of Bulgrin that haven't gone yet, that they're still engaged with. And I'm able to kill that unit of Bulgrin down to maybe 1.5 Bulgrin. There isn't much left. And then when they swing back, again, most of their attacks go wide. And I lose a few more, but after the dust has settled, I still have 2 or 3 Plague Marines left over. So this is a 10-man unit of battle line Death Guard infantry, which has taken the brunt of an assault from 2 Bulgrin units. I love that Contagion. That's -1 ballistic skill, -1 weapon skill. It is phenomenally powerful in these kind of circumstances. So with a little bit of a lackluster guard turn 2, we go over to the Death Guard turn 3, and we turn the pressure up to 11. Over on the left flank, my single unit of Plague Marines there are able to once again clear out most of the Kazakin, and then they also charge into combat with the Leman Russ. Now, they don't quite manage to wipe out either unit, but they do tie that Russ up, and they essentially make it combat ineffective by putting it in contagion range and also making it -1 to hit by tying it up in combat. And also, even if it does decide to shoot whilst being in combat, it is also degraded as well. I think by the time they're done with it, it's down to maybe 2 wounds. So it's thoroughly unhappy. But the main event is in the middle. My Plague Marines fall back, just the little survivors. I'm like, you guys are doing a good job. Just take a breather, take a knee. It's all right. The cavalry's coming. And I move forward my Blight Lords. And I also move forward another unit of Plague Marines. Now, my Blight Lords have got a 7-inch charge on a unit of Bullgrim. And my unit of Plague Marines have got an easy charge. They can't fail it. Now, I end up killing the remnant unit of Bullgrim, sort of the 1.5 that were left over, with the firepower from things like the Blight Lords, and also with the bit of firepower I've got from the Plague Marines as well. And I've got some spare firepower that can go into the other Bullgrim unit, and I bring them down, so they've lost at 1 and they've taken some injuries on another. It's going to come down to combat. If I can get these Blight Lords in, it's huge. Because it means not only will I be getting 10 guys with power soldiers into those Bullgrim, but also it means that I will have a big 10-man unit of Blight Lords sat on the middle objective for sites of power. Roll the dice and I fail the charge. I re-roll it with the CP and I get it. Just bang on the money for what I need. And the Blight Lords finally find their legs and they go charging in. And then the unit of Plague Marines gets a big 12-inch charge well, so they all get in. And between those two units, we cut down pretty much all of the Bullgrims. There might have been one an injured one left, but there really wasn't much left of them. And I think the survivors ended up getting... I think there was a survivor. There was one Bullgrim left, and he ended up dying to my Blight Lord pooping on him with his mortal wounds. So we just sweep the middle clear, and now we have got 2 sites of power firmly in our grasp. One on the left, because a Tallyman there, one in the middle, and that puts the guard onto the back foot. Now, going into turn 3 for the guard, let's just have a little situation check. They have got all of their artillery at the back, and that's fine. And they've got that objective on the bottom right, and that's fine. But they have almost nothing else left on the board. There's nothing in the center, and their main units for doing that, the Bullgrim, are now gone. And then we've got the units on the left, which consist of a Leman Russ on 1 or 2 wounds, a handful of Kazakin, and 5 Scions. A Sentinel. There's not much assets they have got in play here. Now, they go for a big push, and they try and sweep my Plague Marines away on the top left, and they do bring them down to being pretty combat effective. There's like 4 left and the Tallyman. That's about it. The tank commander's degraded and he's in contagion range. Everything up there is degraded and is in contagion range. I've got Cloud of Flies. I've got smoke available. There's not much that the guard are able to do. They do slam a lot of firepower into the middle objective, and they are able to clear away the remnants of the Plague Marine unit that had taken the punch from the Ogrins, and they do again slow down the Terminators, but there's just not enough substance left anywhere on the board to really deliver the killing blow. And so despite the guards' best efforts, they're just running out of stuff too quickly. Their elite nature, which gave them good force concentration, is now biting them in the ass because they haven't got enough stuff to keep the momentum going. And Death Guard turn 4, we seal the deal. I have another unit of Plague Marines inside my second Land Raider because I had one at the north, one that died in the middle, essentially, and then I had one more that was in the middle with the Blight Lords, and then I had one more that I'd kept in my Land Raider up until this point. And turn 4, that second Land Raider, just as the Guard have spent 3 turns clearing the top left, another Land Raider with Plague Marines turns up, and we clear everything. Sentinel goes down, Tank Commander goes down, Exterminator goes down, Scions go down. That whole left flank is cleared. And despite the fact the Guard have got a couple of CP for reinforcement, we know the Guards are going to come back. There is now, at the end of Death Guard turn 4, there's nothing that the Guard can do to do anything about the left-hand flank. It's been secured again by another Armoured Fist of Chaos. The middle is secured, and they're all sites of powered as well. And so we get to the end of turn 4 for Death Guard, and Ash is like, let's just call it. We've got plenty of time. Do you want to just sort of see what cards we pull for the secondaries and then call it there? I'm like, yeah, fair enough, mate. No point in forcing someone to play out a game if they don't want to. And so we just pull the last few cards. We see what points we can get. And we get to the end, we speed run to the end of turn 5, and it ends 78 points to the Death Guard, and it ends 69 points, the Gentleman's Score, to Ash and the Imperial Guard. So another victory for the Smelly Invaders. And I have to say, my main lesson from this game was that the Death Guard really can push forward and be aggressive. And when you start massing up and when you're able to sort of hop from cover to cover and then bring all of that smelly contagion and all of that power to bear in one cohesive thrust, it is very difficult for the enemy to stop. My main takeaway from the Guard list was that it was elite, and it was very interesting seeing Guard armies and Guard units almost going toe-to-toe with Plague Marines and with Death Guard. They were very elite, but I feel like the issue the Guard had is, at the end of the day, fundamentally, those Khazarkin are still human. They still die very easily. And so the Guard were cleared away a bit quickly, and then there wasn't any second punch. Rather than there being a 1-2 punch, there was just a 1 punch, and it wasn't quite enough. But Ash played a really good game. He did have a little bit of bad luck consistently when he rolled his multi-melters, and he's like, oh, I need to wound those Plague Marines on 3s. He rolls things like 1s and 2s. So there was a little bit of bad luck on the Guard side. I will say that my luck was pretty normal. I didn't have good luck. It was pretty much normal across the board. But overall, I think the main issue with the Guard force was there was quality, but I think there was a lack of quantity. But with 2 victories in the bag, it was time to go into game number 3. And this time, we would be taking on the Emperor's second finest, the Space Marines. Clearly, the Imperial Guard were not up to the task, and it seems like if you need to deal with Heretic Astartes, the only thing that you can do is send in Astartes of your own. And James and his Black Templars were not messing around. We were staring down the barrel of a full-blown Black Templar Iron Storm Spearhead. In the opposing list, we had a Tet Marine with the Master of Machine War Enhancement. We then had another basic Tet Marine. There was a unit of Assault Intercessor with Jump Packs, another unit of Assault Intercessor with Jump Packs, and then we had an Incursor Squad and a Scout Squad. There were 3 Gladiator Reapers, and then we had 2 Gladiator Valiants, and then 2 Gladiator Lancers. Finally, there were 2 Predator Destructors, autocannons on top, las cannons on the sides, and a Vindicator. The mission was Priority Targets, where you get a lot of bonus points for scoring objectives at the end of the game. And the twist was actually Secret Intel, but James and I both completely forgot this, so essentially the twist was Chilling Reign. And then the deployment map was Crucible of Battle. But before we get to deployment, we need to address the terrain that was on this map. Now, this terrain was pre-set up by Just Play, and they have their own in-house custom terrain maps. And I have to say, and I'm normally, I don't like criticizing stuff too much, but I want this to be constructive criticism. And I do hope that someone at Just Play, hears this and they take it on board. It's not me complaining or moaning or anything like that. I mean this with the utmost respect and also with genuine feedback to them. But this terrain was possibly the worst tournament terrain that I have played on since playing on player-placed terrain at Adepticon, and I don't say that lightly. Frankly, there was just the illusion of terrain, but actually the board was incredibly open, and the big problem was not just the terrain, it was the terrain combined with the deployment map that they'd chosen, the Crucible of Battle. Essentially, it was possible for one side, whichever side had the greater firepower, to turn one, get clear line of sight from multiple angles right into the opposing side's deployment zone. If this had been regular hammer and anvil deployment, I think it would have gone a long way to solving the terrain issues. But sweeping engagement, Crucible Battle meant that essentially one side could deploy quite far up onto your flank, and then you can just move a paltry few inches forward and you have got line of sight straight into the enemy deployment zone. And that middle of the enemy deployment zone has no cover whatsoever. That little nubbin of terrain that you can see in my deployment zone is literally, it's just like it's a crater. It's not even a forest, it's a crater. That's what it counts as. So you're completely exposed, and the only areas you have to hide is you have a tiny corner behind a ruin on the left hand side, and then you've got a small, it's tall but it's pretty small, L-shaped ruin on the right hand side, and then you've got a little bit of terrain you can hide on the mid board as well. But again, it's very, very limited. Very limited indeed, and it essentially means it's a shooting gallery. This is Planet Bowling Ball, and like I said, the side which has the greater firepower has a huge advantage in this game. And unfortunately for me, I did not have the advantage in firepower. That very much rested with the Iron Storm, and I don't often like giving away too much in these after action reports. I like to sort of let the turns play out, but this game was a bit like the Battle of Camden Fields. It was over before it began. And I don't want anyone thinking I'm making excuses or anything like that. I'm being totally honest with you guys. And, I always say if there's an important factor that is determining a game, and if it's a blow by blow, I always try and highlight that. But the number one thing that is important, that can determine winners and losers in games of 40k, it is terrain. It's the number one thing. And unfortunately, I think the terrain here, it wasn't great. And to give you an idea of how bad this was, and to assure you that it isn't just my game that was at issue, multiple tables. I think there were at least 3 or 4 tables that on this final round that had finished their games inside of 20-25 minutes. That's including deployment. People were literally rolling off, finding out who was going first, and someone was just driving forward and just blowing the other person off the table. And it was like, oh, well, I literally can't recover from this. I'll try and do my turn 1. I've got nothing left. That's it. I think there was a Space Wolf player there who he was running Wolf Jail, and this was basically completely open. And I think he said he lost 85% of his army in one turn, because I think he was also facing off against a very, very shooty Space Marine army, and it just moved forward, could see everything, and just blew him off the board, and he couldn't do anything about it. So I know I have given the game away a little bit there regarding to obviously the situation with this game, but I'll still take you through quickly, turn by turn, what happened. And there were a few mistakes that I made that definitely compounded the problem as well. Now, for my deployment, I had one Land Raider on the left, and I had my other Land Raider and my Rhinos over on the right hand side, just desperately trying to get what cover I can. For the Black Templars, they basically deployed tanks across the line in a position where they could just move into the center, because if you control the center, you can see on all of the objectives, none of the objectives got any cover, you can see all of the objectives and just delete anything that moves onto them. There was a concentration of Lancers on the right hand flank, and there was a concentration of the Gladiator Reapers in the center, and then you had the Vindicator center, and then over on the left you had the Valiants. To rub salt in the wound for me, Priority Targets is one of those missions that tends to favour going second, so naturally Skinwalker Mordian reared his ugly head and I went first. I don't think it would have made much of a difference, but it was definitely adding to the uphill battle. Now, in my first turn, I decided to play it a little bit cagey. I don't just want to drive out there and just get tabled in a single turn. So I take one of my rhinos and I push it forward into the center to score area denial. And really, that's about it. I just don't do too much more with my first turn. I'm just trying to score what points I can and see where the Black Templars are going to move. Because if they decide to move round onto the right flank, I might be able to gank them with like 2 or 3 units of Plague Marines. If they move into the middle, I might be able to get a crossfire going on here. The only damage of note that I do to the Black Templars is I am able to destroy their infiltrating unit of scouts. But that's it. 5 neophytes down, and we go over to Black Templar turn 1. Now, with me being pretty cagey, there aren't a huge amount of targets the Black Templar shoot at, but they push out across the board, trying to secure that vital middle ground. The big issue here is that I got pretty bad secondaries turn 1. I got area denial, and I got capture enemy outpost. And the Black Templars get secure no man's land, which they do easily, and investigate signals, which they do in the back 2 corners. So I got 3 points on my first turn, and the Black Templars managed to get 9. In terms of the damage dealt, the Black Templars clear away the Rhino and the Plague Marines in the center of the board. There's 1 or 2 survivors from the Plague Marine unit, but that's about it. Turn 2 for the Death Guard, and things pick up a little bit. I'm able to get 5 points for priority targets, and I draw Cleanse and no prisoners. I cleanse in the middle with the survivors of the Plague Marine squad, and I get no prisoners because I destroy a unit of infiltrators that had moved out on the left-hand flank. I take a unit of my Plague Marines, I disembark them from the Land Raider, and then I go in there and clear them up. Now that gets me 1 unit for no prisoners, but this is where the Land Raider meta, the double Land Raider meta, was established. You heard it here first, folks. On the right-hand side, my Land Raider can draw line of sight to one of the Gladiator Lancers who had been doing some investigate signals in the back right-hand corner, and between its firepower and it being softened up by some Plague Marines that had got out from the Rhinos on the right-hand side, I'm able to bring down the Gladiator Lancer. So scratch 1 Lancer for me on the right-hand flank. And then over on the left-hand flank, without any support whatsoever, my other Land Raider just gets 4 hits with the las cannons, 4 wounds with the las cannons. The Marines basically don't make any saves, and boom, 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 2 Gladiators down. 1 Valiant, 1 Lancer in 1 turn. Black Templar turn 2, and we have actually pushed them back to just 1 primary. They're only holding their home objective. Over on the right-hand side, the other Lancer comes out and decides it wants to get revenge for its brother on my Land Raider. Now, it fires, and it gets 2 hits, it gets 2 wounds, but I pass 1 of my 5-up armor saves. The Land Raider takes a hefty blow, but doesn't die and isn't degraded. Over on the middle, the remnants of the Plague Marines are finished off there, and then we also lose the other Plague Marine squad, which got Oath of Moment, the ones that had gone out and taken care of the infiltrators. Unfortunately for the Death Guard, the Black Templars had a pretty good turn on their secondaries once again. They had behind enemy lines, which they easily scored with some deep striking assault intercessors with jump packs, and then they got extend battle lines, which they just moved their death ball of tanks onto the middle objective. Death Guard turn 3, and we are doing everything we can to try and keep up with the points. We get 5 on primary, and then for our secondaries, we get deployed teleporter Homer. I've got the Nurglings and Deep Strike, they come down, and they're able to deploy the teleporter Homer. I then get extend battle lines as well. What's interesting is I had rapid ingress my Terminators last turn, and because my opponent knew I was going to do this rapid ingress because he could see where I was sort of eyeing up, he brought down his other unit of assault intercessors to basically screen out the right flank where the Tech Marine and the other Gladiator Lancer was. Now, that was a very effective screen, because if you hadn't put that there, I could have gone really close to the middle of the board, rapid ingress, been in a pretty safe position to start contaminating everything up. But as it was, I'm basically being corralled by the terrain, and by my opponent's screening, I'm being corralled over to the extreme right-hand flank. But I do manage to get my extend battle lines in my turn 3 because I get the charge off against those 5 assault intercessors that were screening, and I clear them away. So I kill the assault intercessors with my Blight Lords. Then we have, I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but then we get to the shooting. And the Land Raiders once again do a T-pose and assert dominance over the Gladiators. My Land Raider over on the left picks off another Gladiator, this time going for a Reaper. Again, this Gladiator pops smoke, and it's still, I just get my 4 hits. This Land Raider is off the chain. I get the 4 hits of the lance cannons, I get the 4 wounds of the lance cannons, and I just pick up another Gladiator on the left-hand flank. Then over on the right-hand side, my other Land Raider is really annoyed that the Gladiator Lancer would have the gumption, would dare to shoot at it. And so once again, my 2 Plague Marine units soften the Gladiator up, and then my Land Raider goes in and finishes it off. So we have actually, in a 1 versus 2 fight, my Land Raider, not including all the Plague Marines that were doing some significant supporting fire, but my Land Raider has gone toe-to-toe with 2 Gladiator Lancers and has emerged victorious. Quad Lance Cannon Land Raider meta incoming. I'm telling you guys, it's a thing. It's not really a thing, but it was still fun. But this does mean that the Black Templars have essentially had their flanks trimmed a little bit. The problem is that the Black Templars don't really care because they've got a death ball in the middle of the board. I'm struggling on the flanks to really I'm killing things, but I'm not really pushing forward all that much because, I'm slow. And the Black Templar firepower is just devastating. So this time they do get 10 on primary because they hold the middle and they hold the back. They Oath of Mo at my Terminators, and pretty much the whole death ball goes into the Terminators and picks them up. I really wish that I'd been able to bring them a bit closer. I really wish a few of them had been able to survive, start contaminating up and spaffing out mortal wounds from the Lord. But unfortunately, when an Iron Storm picks one of your units for Oath, that unit isn't going to be around much longer. So I lose all of my Terminators there. That does allow the Iron Storm to get overwhelming force. Those Terminators had been on objectives, so they get points for the Terminators and then the Lord. And they also get deployed teleport home in the back line because I had almost finished off the Assault Intercessors in the backfield with my spare firepower from the Land Raiders, like the Heavy Bolters and the Combi Bolters and the Havoc Launchers, but hadn't quite finished them off. So deployed teleporter goes off, and so I'm trying to keep pace with the Black Templars on points, but they are pulling ahead pretty significantly by the end of round 3. And unfortunately for the Death Guard, going into round 4, there really isn't much that I've got left. I've got 2 Land Raiders, but thanks to the terrain and where I position them, they're kind of just stuck taking pot shots from the back lines. They're not really doing that armored spearhead that I really like to do with them. And I've got 2 units of Plague Marines left over, but they're essentially on foot at this point. There's nowhere really for them to go. I push 1 unit forward onto the objective on the right-hand side, but that's about it. My Land Raiders also do start struggling a little bit, and both of them this turn, I don't think I actually get a kill this turn. I think I damage 2 separate vehicles, but I don't manage to actually kill either one of them. For my points, I am able to defend Stronghold, and I am able to get a little bit behind enemy lines because one of my Nurgling squads survives some of the firepower from the Black Templars on turn 3. But that's it. They're the last points I'm realistically getting this game because it comes over to Black Templar turn 4, and they pick up my remaining Plague Marines that are in a position to really do anything, and they badly maul the other Plague Marine squad as well. They also managed to pick up 10 points on primary again because they're holding the middle, and they get 5 points on no prisoners because they kill a Rhino and they kill a unit of Plague Marines with a Tallyman in it. Interestingly, they have their other objective is engaged on all fronts, and they can't score it. Because I've taken out all of these little units of Marines at this point, the only units that are left are all the tanks in the middle. So they don't get engaged. So it gives you an idea of how powerful that middle was. Anytime I moved out, I was just obliterated off the board. That's how open it was. But the Marines needed next to no maneuverability to essentially just see everything they wanted to see. But as you can see, they weren't able to move and get lots of secondaries that way, but they didn't need to. Turn 5 for the Plague Marines. I'm able to get 10 on primary because I get 5 at the beginning of the turn, 5 at the end of the game. That's holding my home. I draw Assassination, which is 2 Tech Marines which have got lone operative next to vehicles, so I don't get that. And I have Secure No Man's Land, which I'm able to do with the remnants of the last Plague Marine unit. My firepower, I am able to kill another one of the Black Templar vehicles. I think by the end of the game, they are down to maybe only, I think it's 5 vehicles, 2 of which are very badly injured. But my Land Raiders, after having a very hot turn 2 and turn 3, they do cool off a little bit on turn 4, turn 5. I think the big thing was that they were now trying to do things under their own steam, whereas in the previous turns, they had a bit of Plague Marine fire support. As for the Black Templar, turn 5, they go ham. 25 points for priority target because they're able to hold 2 at the beginning of the turn, and they're able to easily move out onto 3 at the end of the game because they just move out. They don't bother shooting the Land Raiders in their final turn. They get Area Denial, which gets them 5 points, and they get Assassinate. One of the tally men must have still been knocking around at this point from the injured Plague Marine squad. So we get to the end of the game, and the Black Templars are comfortably in control of 3 objectives. They have still got 5 of their tanks left, and they've got their two Tech Marines. And the Death Guard, unfortunately, have been reduced down to just 2 Land Raiders, both of which are sitting somewhat towards the back, just plinking off some las cannon shots. So it wasn't that the Black Templar didn't take any damage. I'm actually pretty proud of the damage that I did do, and I did manage to come away with 64 victory points, which means at least I made a bit of a game of it. I didn't get completely smashed, barely getting like 10, 20 points. But the Black Templars, the will of the Emperor was not to be denied, and a very, very, very good game and well played to James, as he did get the big 100 points. And to give you an idea of how much of an officer and a gentleman James was, after the game, we got on actually really, really well throughout the game. We both have a similar sense of humor, and I knew I'd found a mood kindred, a kindred spirit, when he was throwing some Starship Troopers quotes out at me, and he was throwing some movie quotes out at me, and I was like, wait, do you communicate exclusively in quotes as well? And he's like, I do. He actually went, oh, I'm sorry, man, not everyone gets the quotes I get. I went, dude, I'm getting all the quotes, man. So we got on like a house on fire. It was a really, really good game. Really enjoyed it. And afterwards, James was such a nice guy that he invited me out with him and a couple of other guys to go and get some beer and get some victory chicken. And we ended up going to a place called Patterson's in Liverpool. And if you ever get the chance to go to Patterson's in Liverpool, it is amazing. The best fried chicken, the best victory chicken I've ever had. I've been there once before, but I was a little bit under the weather, so I didn't fully appreciate it. This time I went and I was starving. I hadn't eaten all day, and I just sunk a couple of pints, and I had half a kilogram of chicken and lovely gravy and chips. Oh, honestly, I've got a picture of it, and hopefully Evan, the editor, will put it up on screen now. But that victory chicken was the perfect way to end what was a really, really fun tournament. But with all of that said, we come to the end of round 3, the end of the day and the end of the tournament. I had managed to go 2-1, and I'd had a big victory, a middling victory, and a respectable but somewhat major loss as well. My final position in the tournament ended up being, I believe it was 7th or 8th. I ended up coming 8th out of 22 people. So I finished in the top half, which isn't too bad at all. Now, this was my first tournament outing with the Death Guard, and I really enjoyed it. I don't know what it is about the army, but as an Imperial Guard player, it felt very natural to step into the Death Guard shoes. It's a little bit like how, as an Imperial Guard player, it feels somewhat natural to step into the shoes of the Tyranids. There's just something about these armies which share common factors, share commonality, and they just sort of scratch that similar itch. So if you are an Imperial Guard player that's interested in going down the heretical route, I can definitely recommend Death Guard. They have that power, they have that quality, but at the same time, there's still the essence of sort of durability and toughness. You know, get hit hard, hit back even harder. It is just a really nice way of playing a non-Imperial Guard army while still sort of having fun and playing with something that feels somewhat familiar. In terms of standout units, the Plague Marines by far were the men of the match. Every single game, they were the ones that were punching well above their weight. And you can tell in that last game when the Plague Marines go away, my damage output really starts falling down. I would say Plague Marines are the best battle line infantry in the game right now. Not just for Death Guard, I'm talking the entire game. They've got all the firepower and they've got really, really good abilities as well. And it's just all the free equipment. It goes a long way to allowing them to pretty much take on anything in the game. I also love the contagion that I picked. I know a lot of people prefer the AP, the extra AP contagion. The -1 weapon skill, -1 ballistic skill is definitely my preferred one. And in fact, in that last game, the benefit of hindsight in that last game, if you look at the first two, I'd been really aggressive and really big bollocks. In that last game, I got voodooed a little bit. I got intimidated a bit. I think if I just gone on the line with everything, look, I should have seen that game and gone, I'm probably going to lose anyway. The one chance I have is to go first and go on the line. And if I do, then great. But if I don't, I've lost. I think if I had done that, it would have overwhelmed the Black Templars, because by feeding my army in piecemeal and playing it cagey, it meant that they could pick one unit a turn to oath, and that's exactly what they want to do. If I rush everything at them, it means that they can only oath one thing, and then the other three things hit them hard. Yeah, I think playing cagey was the big mistake in the last game, and I think if you want to do well with Death Guard and you want to do well, you need to be getting in contagion range as soon as possible. That is the main takeaway. Last thing to mention, Land Raiders. I really like them. They're probably a little expensive. I am definitely curious to see what happens if I took all the Land Raiders out and put 6 units of Plague Marines in Rhinos, but I did not feel handicapped by the Land Raiders at all, and they consistently felt very, very durable, and I only ever lost 1 at most per game. That's somewhat telling. In addition, like 10th, which is very lethal, being able to only lose 1 Land Raider a game does go to the testament of how durable these things can be. And their outgoing firepower. Quad las cannon with a little bit of, plague heavy bolter as well. Yeah, I was impressed all round with the Land Raider. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Did you enjoy me running this non-Imperial Guard force? What did you think of the heavy mechanized Death Guard? How would you change this list? And if I'm going to run Death Guard again in the future, how would you like me to mix up the army? What would you like me to see take next to the tournament? Don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian Glory Hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Marcus Roberts, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Varney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.